listen, because we are, this is what Mel Stride, who we're about to talk to, is giving a speech on today, Claire, and he is the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, and he wants to try and fill vacancies that have traditionally been filled by foreigners with British workers. Now, it sounds optimistic and a good idea, but we have historically struggled to do that.
We have.
How does he propose to do that?
So he's not in this Telegraph article, but Alex actually highlighted this. What Mel Stride is hoping to do is actually involve people who are economically inactive, introduce boot camps for them, for those of them that are out of work. But we've got a net migration high at record high of 672,000 last year, with workers from across the globe filling vacancies created by fewer post-Brexit arrivals from the EU.
Okay.
But at the same time, there are more than 9 million Britons who are looking for work.
Interesting. Well, look, let's pick that point up straight away, as we have got the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, joining us and probably listening to all of that. We are looking forward to your speech later on to hear exactly what you're planning to do with these job boot camps. Explain to us how you're going to persuade British workers, increasingly economically inactive, to fill these vacancies that we have traditionally used foreign workers for.
So I think the main point here is you've mentioned the migration numbers. We're absolutely determined to see those come down. In fact, all the forecasts are that they will be being reduced very significantly, about 300,000 people fewer coming in through the migration route. We recognise there are hotspots in the labour market around certain sectors, and what I'm going to be setting out today is a very clear plan that will be really utilising the kind of advantages and schemes that we have at job centres to have an enhanced focus on those areas. I've set up a cross-ministerial task force that will be looking at making those kind of changes to the way the labour market works in those sectors to encourage and increase the supply of labour into them. We did that with HGV licences and drivers, if you remember, back in 2021, when we had 33 different changes, which even in the short term really freed up labour supply. So those are the kind of things that I'm going to be talking about today, along with a major campaign to make sure that employers are really fully aware of all the advantages and the schemes and the money and the investment and the training and the apprenticeships and everything else that is vested within our job centres to make sure that that happens.
I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but as Izzy was just saying, historically, we as a country have really struggled with this. How is this plan any different from what we've seen before? Is it just more hot air?
No, not at all. And in fact, we showed in 2021, when, if you recall, we had that shortage of HGV drivers as we came out of the pandemic. And what we did was we sat down and we really analysed that part of the labour market, and we came up with those 33 things which were quick and effective and freed up the supply of labour. And now in that case, one of them was the licensing arrangements around being able to drive a heavy goods vehicle, and we made changes there that speeded up the flow of drivers coming through. I'm going to be meeting with leaders across industry and across these sectors later on today in a round table as part of that ongoing dialogue that we're having now with great intensity as to how we can actually help continue to free up more labour into those areas. This is a great opportunity for our country. This is an opportunity to really address this issue now that migration is coming down and will be coming down quite dramatically, to get the domestic British people into those domestic jobs across the domestic labour market.
But I suppose
I'm really very excited about what we're going to be talking
except
about.
Except it demonstrates, or you could say exposes, the challenge of, you know, trying to fix one problem and creating another one. You're trying to bring down net migration, but you're admitting to us that this is going to create a recruitment challenge, which in turn will not necessarily be great for growth, which is one of the big pledges for Rishi Sunak. Labour is saying that you should be putting in place proper plans rather than setting up another talking shop.
Well, this certainly isn't a talking shop. This is a really serious, clear plan, and I've outlined, for example, the approach that we're going to be taking within each one of these sectors. We have proof that this works because we did this in 2021 when it came to HGV drivers. We were able to intervene in that part of the labour market and make a substantial difference really relatively quickly. But this is going to be alongside, of course, all the things that the Chancellor, for example, funded with his £2.5 billion investment in our Back to Work plan, bringing all that together, enhanced focus on those sectors. This is a big opportunity for the domestic workforce.
Look, we want to ask you about our biggest story today, our top story. It's the story that is dominating, and rightly so, the front pages of the newspapers this morning. It is, of course, the findings of the infected blood scandal. That report took 6 years, finally published yesterday, but it found that the blood scandal could largely have been avoided. There was a pervasive cover-up to hide the truth. It's the biggest treatment disaster in the NHS. The papers have called it a day of shame for the British state. What's your response to this report?
Well, I think, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, I think this has shaken the nation to its core. I think to have ended up in a situation where 30,000 people became infected, 3,000, more than 3,000 of those have died, and to be a mother or father watching a child pass away, or indeed a young person losing, for example, your parents, is just something that is beyond description. I think what the Prime Minister set out very clearly yesterday is absolutely right, which is, firstly, we must provide full and comprehensive compensation, and John Glenn, the Cabinet Minister for Cabinet Office, will be making a statement to Parliament later about that. But we've also got to address the recommendations made within Sir Brian's report, a very extensive and comprehensive report, and we will be doing that also.
Yeah, but why should anybody trust the words that you're speaking, that the Prime Minister was speaking yesterday? I mean, Rishi Sunak was named in that report. His government was found to have been sluggish in the pace of compensation, perpetuating the injustice for victims. And your former colleague, former Health Secretary Sajid Javid, said time and again ministers have stood at the dispatch box under successive governments, including myself, promising that lessons will be learned. So can I ask Mr Sunak, he said yesterday, why will it be any different this time? And plenty of people will be asking that this morning.
Well, I totally understand the frustration that there is around the length of time this has taken. This is something that goes back to the 1970s and governments of all colours. But I do think that we reached a very important point yesterday with the publication of Sir Brian's final report, with the statement made by the Prime Minister, making it very clear that full and comprehensive compensation will now be brought forward. And as I say, there will be a further statement to Parliament today to set out some of the details of that.
Can you this morning, though, give us assurances that that comprehensive package of compensation will all go to the victims specifically, not some of it siphoned off for lawyers in other ways? It will all 100% be going to those who've been absolutely seen their lives ruined by this letdown?
Well, I'm absolutely confident, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, that full and comprehensive compensation will be provided to all those that have been affected in the right way. And I don't want to prejudge, indeed I don't know exactly what John Glenn will be saying to Parliament this afternoon, but I have no doubt that he will be following up to the letter the commitment that the Prime Minister made very clearly yesterday.
Lord Ken Clarke is specifically named in this report. It concluded he'd misled the public in an indefensible way over the risks from blood transfusions. He had said there was no conclusive proof that AIDS could be spread through blood. He's now facing calls to be stripped of his peerage. Do you think he should?
Well, it's not a matter for government, I think, to opine on forfeiture of honours. There's a process that is there for that is established outside of government.
But what does justice, I suppose, is the question.
There are going to be many lessons.
It's so easy, isn't it, always to say, well, that's not in our remit.
The report itself is 2,700 pages or thereabouts, I think. I certainly haven't had a chance to read it between yesterday and this morning.
But you can understand, can't you, for victims' families? You can understand for victims' families who say they were gaslit by Sir Ken Clarke, being told that there was no proof that AIDS could be that could be transmitted through blood, when they knew that was the case with their very loved family members, so many of whom have since died. You can understand why they then want to see him lose his peerage.
Well, I totally understand that there will be absolutely correctly very strong feelings about many aspects of the conclusions and what has been unearthed. I mean, look, Sir Brian has been very clear about the issue of cover-up within the health service and amongst senior officials. And those are things that need to be looked into And in the course of time, absolutely will be. I've no doubt about that.
But I just want to push you on what I suppose justice looks like for you. I mean, you don't want to comment on whether Ken Clarke should have his peerage stripped, but the Labour Mayor, Andy Burnham, is talking about corporate manslaughter against Whitehall departments. Should we see doctors facing criminal prosecutions? I mean, what's your vision of justice?
Well, justice is following up robustly on the findings of the report. Now, in the case of corporate manslaughter and criminal charges and proceedings, then clearly that is a matter for the police and for the Crown Prosecution Service. But look, these matters will be looked at very carefully. I mean, of that I can absolutely assure you. But I don't think it'd be right for me to start opining on various specific elements of that at this stage. They need to be looked into properly. But the matters that you've just raised really are matters for the police and the Crown Prosecution Service.
Just finally, we want to pick up on the ICC Chief Prosecutor's applications yesterday that he's filed for the arrest warrants against Hamas leaders and Israeli leadership as well. Some people are saying that the British government's not without fault, and if these charges are brought by the International Criminal Court, that Britain could be considered for aiding and abetting Israel in all of this. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't accept that. We are here as a key ally of Israel, but that isn't a commitment that isn't without bounds. And we've been very clear to the Israelis, for example, the importance of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza, and that's why we've cooperated with the Americans on the building of that pier to bring aid in. That's why we've pressed the Israelis to make sure that those crossings at Erez and the port at Ashdod, etc., are open for exactly that purpose, and calling for restraint at every turn and the appropriate protection of civilians, so that we can move to that point where we can start seeing hostages released and start to move to that temporary ceasefire, at least, to help further speed up the availability of humanitarian aid. And those are things that we're doing. I think the Foreign Secretary is now out in the Middle East. I think that's his 11th visit to that region for exactly that purpose, and that is how we are positively engaging with this situation.
OK, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much.